Most people today think a cold winter means a few frosty mornings and maybe some slush on the streets. But if you lived in the Netherlands during the 1980s, winter wasn't just a season, it was something you had to prepare for. Entire cities slowed down, canals turned into highways of ice, and snow didn't melt after a day or two. It stayed. And the craziest part, this wasn't some distant frozen era. It was only a few decades ago. Back then, Dutch winters felt like they belonged to another country entirely. Weeks of snow cover were normal, not newsworthy. Temperatures dropped so low they rewrote record books, and people planned their daily lives around ice instead of rain. Kids didn't just hope for snow days, they expected them. Adults didn't ask if the canals would freeze, they asked when. And some winters went so far that they revived traditions most people thought were gone forever. But those brutal, unforgettable winters didn't last. And what happened next marked a turning point that few saw coming. For people who experienced it, winter in the 1980s wasn't about one big storm. It was the consistency that made it feel unreal. Snow didn't fall and disappear overnight. It built up day after day until white landscapes became the default. On average, the ground stayed covered in snow for nearly 3 weeks every winter, almost double what people are used to now. Streets, fields, rooftops, it all stayed frozen in place. This wasn't treated as extreme weather at the time. It was just how winter worked. Trains ran slower, cars struggled, and everyone adapted without much surprise. Thick coats, frozen fingers, and icy mornings were part of the routine. Looking back now, it feels almost hard to believe how normal it all seemed. But some winters didn't just feel cold. They pushed the country to its limits. And when the snow really started piling up, entire regions found themselves buried in ways that would be unthinkable today. In certain years, winter didn't just blanket the Netherlands, it overwhelmed it. Snow piled up so high in some areas that it reshaped daily life. On the Wadden Islands, drifts reportedly reached heights close to a full meter, swallowing roads and fences whole. In the southern province of Limburg, snow stacked up layer by layer until streets became narrow corridors carved through white walls. Getting from one place to another wasn't guaranteed anymore. Buses were delayed, cars were abandoned, and walking often became the only option. Entire towns moved at the pace of the weather, and the longer the snow stayed, the more serious the situation became, because beneath all that white was something even more unforgiving. The real danger wasn't what fell from the sky, it was the cold that followed. And that cold would soon make history. As the snow settled in, temperatures didn't just drop, they collapsed. Cold like this wasn't about discomfort, it was about survival. In January 1985, thermometers in parts of the country plunged to levels that are still talked about today. In Deelen, the temperature reportedly fell past -20 degrees Celsius, a number that turned breath into ice and made exposed skin sting within seconds. Pipes froze, engines refused to start, and even short trips outside required planning. This wasn't the kind of cold you shrugged off with an extra scarf. It demanded respect. Every morning felt like a test, and every night brought the same question: how much colder could it get? And as brutal as the air became, it transformed the country in a way that looked almost magical. Because once the cold held on long enough, the water stopped moving. Before long, the Netherlands began to freeze from the inside out. Canals that usually carried boats and reflected city lights turned solid, layer by layer, until they became paths of ice. In Amsterdam, these frozen waterways weren't just a spectacle, they became part of daily life. People skated to work, to school, even to visit friends, gliding past buildings that usually stood beside flowing water. What makes this so hard to imagine now is how often it happened. Frozen canals weren't a once-in-a-generation event. They were expected during severe winters, and the entire country seemed ready for it. Skates came out of storage, and ice was checked the same way roads are checked today. But when the cold lasted long enough, it unlocked something far bigger than casual skating. It brought back a legendary race that many believed would never return. When the ice reached the right thickness, the entire nation held its breath. For more than 2 decades, one of the Netherlands' most famous traditions had been silent, waiting for a winter cold enough to bring it back. Then, in 1985, it finally happened. The Elfstedentocht returned, a grueling 200-kilometer skate through 11 cities, made possible only because the canals had frozen solid for long enough. Millions followed every update as skaters pushed through exhaustion, cracking ice, and brutal wind. Evert van Bentham crossed the finish line first, instantly becoming a national name. And just when people thought they'd witnessed something once in a lifetime, winter did something unheard of. It repeated itself. In 1986, the race was held again, back to back, with Van Bentham winning once more. That second race carried a secret that would only come out later. Among the skaters was a man registered under a fake name, quietly completing the course like everyone else. It was later revealed to be Prince Willem-Alexander himself. But while the country celebrated, winter had more surprises left, and it didn't care about the calendar. Winter didn't wait for December to make its presence known. In 1980, the cold arrived so early it caught people off guard. By the beginning of November, temperatures in parts of the country stayed below freezing for an entire day, marking one of the earliest true ice days ever recorded. It was a warning sign that this season wouldn't follow the usual rules. And just when people thought winter had finally loosened its grip, it refused to leave. In 1981, snow fell again deep into spring, with late April landscapes turning white when flowers should have been blooming. Coats were pulled back out. Heaters stayed on. Winter stretched itself far beyond its welcome. Then came a moment that felt almost unreal, a holiday scene straight out of a postcard. Because that same year, the Netherlands experienced something that had already become rare even back then. By the time Christmas arrived in 1981, the country was already wrapped in snow. Not just a light dusting, but thick layers that stayed in place through the entire holiday. Trees, rooftops, and streets disappeared under white blankets, creating an official white Christmas, something many people would never experience again in their lifetime. Children played outside for hours, and cities felt quieter, almost frozen in time. The snow didn't melt the next day or even the next week. It lingered, turning Christmas into part of a much longer winter story. At the time, it felt magical. Looking back now, it feels historic. Because not long after that, something shifted. And the winters that defined an entire decade began to fade faster than anyone expected. By the late 1980s, the frozen, relentless winters that had defined the decade began to disappear, almost overnight. The winters of 1988 to 89 and 1989 to 90 were startlingly mild. Snow barely touched the ground, canals stayed liquid, and the kind of deep freezes people had grown up with became memories rather than reality. It was as if the country had flipped a switch. The brutal winters that had shaped daily life, inspired legendary races, and created moments people still talk about, had quietly ended. For those who remembered the 1980s, it was almost unthinkable. How could the same country that once buried itself in snow now seem so warm and calm during winter? And with that shift came a realization. The winters of the 1980s weren't just unusual. They were an era that would likely never return. If you loved taking this journey back to the frozen winters of the Netherlands, make sure to subscribe to Dear Old Holland. We dive into the stories, memories, and moments that shaped Dutch life. Things you won't find anywhere else. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we explore more of the Netherlands' hidden history, one story at a time,